There is something strangely unquestioned about motion. We see it everywhere, constantly, so continuously that the mind eventually stops noticing how mysterious it really is. A bird crossing the sky, rain falling through cold evening air, dust drifting through sunlight near a quiet window. Everything appears to move from one place to another, as if motion itself is one of the most fundamental truths in existence. And perhaps nothing seems to embody that truth more perfectly than light. Light appears to travel effortlessly. A beam from a flashlight cuts through darkness. The glow of distant stars crosses unimaginable stretches of space before finally arriving at human eyes. Sunlight leaves the surface of the sun and reaches Earth 8 minutes later, warming oceans, cities, forests, and skin as though it completed a journey across emptiness. Every instinct tells us that light behaves like something moving through space, crossing distance moment by moment, just as a ship crosses an ocean or a train crosses land. Motion feels obvious. It feels undeniable. But the deeper physics begins to investigate light itself, the stranger that certainty becomes. Because the unsettling truth is that modern physics does not actually describe light the way human intuition does. Not completely, not comfortably. The closer scientists looked, the more the ordinary idea of motion began to dissolve into something abstract and deeply unfamiliar. And eventually, an almost impossible possibility emerged from the mathematics. A possibility so strange that even many physicists struggle to visualize it clearly. What if light does not truly move through space in the way we imagine at all? What if motion itself is not fundamental, but only an appearance emerging from something deeper? At first, this sounds absurd. After all, you can watch light move. You can point a laser across a room. You can see sunlight slowly disappear during sunset. Motion seems directly visible, but appearances in physics have betrayed humanity before. The earth appears motionless beneath your feet, yet it rotates at enormous speed. Solid objects feel stable and continuous, yet atoms are mostly empty space. Time itself feels universal and steady, yet relativity revealed that time stretches and bends depending on motion and gravity. Again and again, reality has proven less intuitive than human senses would prefer. Light may be another example of that hidden strangeness. The difficulty begins with something deceptively simple. To describe motion, you usually need an object that exists in a definite place at each moment in time. A moving baseball occupies one position, then another, tracing a continuous path through space. Even planets follow trajectories. Their motion can be mapped. But light behaves differently when examined closely enough. At the quantum level, it resists the idea of possessing one single path at all. This became impossible to ignore during experiments involving interference. When individual photons are fired toward a barrier containing two tiny openings, something astonishing happens. If nobody measures which opening the photon passes through, the final pattern suggests the photon behaved like a wave spreading through both openings simultaneously, not partly through one and partly through another, but somehow through all available possibilities at once. The photon does not behave like a tiny object traveling along one clean route. Instead, reality itself becomes smeared into probabilities. And yet the moment a measurement is made, the behavior changes completely. Suddenly, the photon behaves as if it selected one path after all. The wave-like spread disappears. The possibilities collapse into one observable outcome. It is as though reality remains undefined until interaction forces it into clarity. This is where the comforting picture of motion begins to crack. Because if light does not possess one continuous path before observation, what exactly is moving between the starting point and the destination? What travels across space? What crosses the void between stars? The mathematics of quantum mechanics does not provide an easy visual answer. In fact, some interpretations suggest that asking for a definite path before interaction may not even make sense. Physicist Richard Feynman approached this problem with an idea so radical that it still feels almost surreal decades later. Instead of imagining light following one route, he described photons as exploring every possible path simultaneously, not just reasonable paths, but all paths, straight lines, curves, loops, wild, impossible detours through space-time itself. Every conceivable history contributes to the final outcome. The light we observe emerges from an interference pattern between infinite possibilities. And if that picture is even partially correct, then motion begins looking less like a tiny object physically traveling through space and more like a mathematical relationship between events. Light may not move through the universe in the ordinary sense at all. What we call motion may simply be the appearance created when interactions occur between fields, observers, and probabilities. The deeper you sit with this possibility, the stranger existence itself begins to feel, because human intuition imagines reality unfolding frame by frame like scenes in a movie. One moment leads into another. Objects travel continuously through time. Causes produce effects in sequence. But quantum physics repeatedly hints that reality underneath observation may not operate according to such clean narratives. The universe may not evolve as a collection of tiny moving objects. It may instead evolve as relationships within invisible fields of possibility. Even the concept of a photon becomes difficult to picture clearly. People often imagine photons as miniature glowing particles racing through darkness. But photons are not tiny balls of light. In quantum field theory, light emerges as excitations within the electromagnetic field, a field that exists everywhere throughout the universe simultaneously. The photon is not necessarily a little object traveling inside space, the way a pebble travels through air. It may be more accurate to think of it as a disturbance connecting interactions across the field itself. And fields do not behave like ordinary objects. The ocean can form waves without the water itself crossing the entire ocean. A stadium crowd can create moving patterns while individual people barely move at all. Motion can emerge from relationships rather than transport. Perhaps light behaves similarly on the deepest level. Perhaps what appears as traveling photons is actually the unfolding of interactions within an underlying field structure too alien for ordinary intuition to visualize directly. There is another detail that makes light uniquely mysterious. According to relativity, a photon experiences no passage of time. From the perspective of light itself, if such a perspective can even meaningfully exist, the moment of emission and the moment of absorption are not separated by duration. A photon born inside a distant star and absorbed billions of years later arrives instantly from its own frame of reference. To human observers, light crosses cosmic distances, but from the strange geometry of relativity, the separation between beginning and end collapses completely. This creates an unsettling philosophical tension. If no time passes for light, can we truly say it traveled at all? Travel normally implies duration. A journey unfolds through time. But light occupies a strange boundary where time itself breaks down. The universe seems to treat light differently from everything else, and perhaps that difference is trying to tell us something profound. Perhaps motion, as humans experience it, is not a universal feature of reality, but an emergent experience produced by consciousness existing inside time. Perhaps the flowing world we perceive is shaped partly by the structure of observation itself. Beneath that familiar experience may exist something far stranger, where events are connected not through tiny moving objects, but through timeless relationships embedded into the architecture of reality. If that idea feels unsettling, it is because it challenges one of the deepest assumptions humans possess: the assumption that existence unfolds like a story moving forward through space and time. But physics has slowly chipped away at that certainty for more than a century. First, relativity weakened absolute time. Then, quantum mechanics weakened definite reality. And now, light sits directly at the center of both revolutions, behaving less like an object and more like a bridge between worlds humans barely understand. Tonight, as the mind slowly drifts deeper into thought, it becomes possible to imagine the universe differently. Not as a collection of separate things rushing through emptiness, but as an immense, interconnected structure where motion itself emerges from relationships hidden beneath perception. A reality where light does not truly cross the void between stars, but where stars, space, and observers participate together in something timeless and far more mysterious than movement alone. Human beings instinctively imagine space as a kind of giant emptiness, a vast black container stretching endlessly in every direction, filled with stars, planets, galaxies, and drifting particles all moving through it like objects floating inside an enormous cosmic ocean. This image feels natural because it mirrors ordinary life. A bird flies through air, a ship moves across water, a person walks through a room. Space itself seems passive, like a stage where events simply happen. And because light appears to cross that stage constantly, the mind automatically assumes that photons must behave like tiny travelers rushing through an invisible void. But physics has gradually revealed that this image may be deeply incomplete. The strange realization begins when scientists ask a deceptively simple question: what actually is empty space? At first, the answer seems obvious. Empty space should be nothing: the absence of matter, the absence of objects, a perfect void without structure or activity. Yet modern physics discovered that the vacuum of space is not empty at all. Even in regions stripped of particles, radiation, atoms, and dust, something still remains. Invisible quantum fields continue to exist everywhere. These fields do not occupy space the way ordinary objects do. They are woven into reality itself. The electromagnetic field, the electron field, the quark field, the Higgs field, all of them persist continuously throughout the universe, even inside what humans casually call emptiness. And this changes the meaning of motion entirely. Because if fields already exist everywhere, then particles may not need to travel through space the way human intuition imagines. A photon is not necessarily a miniature object flying across a cosmic gap. Instead, it may be more accurate to describe it as a temporary excitation within the electromagnetic field itself, like a ripple emerging within an ocean that already exists everywhere at once. This distinction sounds subtle at first, but its implications are enormous. Imagine standing beside a calm lake at night. You drop a stone into the water, and waves spread outward across the surface. The wave appears to move across the lake, yet the water itself does not travel from one side to the other. Individual molecules mostly oscillate locally, while the pattern propagates across the system. The motion belongs to the structure of the disturbance, more than to the transport of matter itself. Now imagine something even stranger. Imagine a disturbance so abstract that there may not even be a meaningful object moving underneath it at all, only changing relationships within a field, extending across reality. This begins resembling the modern description of light far more closely than the ordinary image of glowing particles racing through darkness. The deeper quantum field theory develops, the harder it becomes to maintain the old mechanical picture of the universe. Reality starts behaving less like a machine filled with tiny moving pieces, and more like an interconnected web of fields constantly interacting and transforming. What humans call particles may only be localized events emerging temporarily from those deeper structures. And if particles themselves are emergent, then motion may also be emergent. This idea becomes even stranger when combined with relativity. According to Einstein's equations, space is not an empty stage independent of reality. Space and time are woven together into a single structure called spacetime, and that structure can bend, stretch, warp, and curve. Gravity is not really a force pulling objects through space. Instead, matter changes the geometry of spacetime itself, and objects follow those curves naturally. Already, the familiar picture begins collapsing. Space is no longer passive emptiness. It possesses geometry. It reacts to energy and mass. It expands across cosmic scales. Time itself changes depending on velocity and gravity. The stage is no longer separate from the actors, but quantum physics pushes even further. Some modern theories suggest that space-time itself may not be fundamental at all. Space may emerge from something deeper, involving quantum information or entanglement relationships beyond ordinary geometry. In other words, distance itself might be an illusion, arising from hidden connections beneath physical reality. And if distance is emergent, what does movement across distance even mean? The question begins sounding almost philosophical, yet it emerges directly from physics. Humans evolved to perceive large-scale reality where objects possess definite locations and move predictably through stable environments. But the universe underneath those scales may not obey such intuitive concepts. Beneath ordinary perception, there may only be relationships, probabilities, and interactions unfolding inside structures the human brain was never designed to visualize. Light sits directly at the center of this mystery because it constantly reveals the limits of ordinary thinking. For centuries, scientists argued about whether light behaved like waves or particles. Neither description fully worked. Waves spread continuously through space, but photons arrive in discrete packets. Particles possess localized positions, but photons create interference patterns, suggesting wave-like behavior. Quantum mechanics eventually accepted an uncomfortable truth. Light does not fit neatly into either category because the categories themselves are too limited. Human language struggles because language evolved for ordinary survival, not for describing the quantum structure of existence. Even the phrase, a photon traveling through space, may only be a useful approximation rather than a literal description. The equations predict outcomes with astonishing accuracy, but the intuitive story humans attach to those equations often breaks down completely. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics avoid describing motion directly altogether. Instead of asking where a photon physically is between interactions, the mathematics focuses only on probabilities connecting measurable events. Reality becomes a network of relationships, rather than a sequence of tiny objects carrying themselves through space moment by moment. And perhaps this is why light feels so mysterious emotionally, not just scientifically, because light defines human perception itself. Every image you have ever seen, arrive through electromagnetic interactions. The faces of people you love, sunsets over oceans, clouds drifting across winter skies. Every visible memory emerged through photons interacting with your nervous system. Human beings trust vision deeply because sight feels immediate and direct. But the very thing carrying visual reality may already be showing that existence is far stranger than appearances suggest. The stars above you do not simply send tiny glowing bullets across emptiness. Something more subtle is happening. Fields interact across spacetime. Quantum probabilities evolve. Relativity bends geometry itself. And somewhere inside this process, conscious observers reconstruct the experience called seeing. The universe starts feeling less solid under this perspective. Not unreal, but fluid, interconnected, almost dreamlike beneath its ordinary surface. Space loses some of its emptiness and becomes active, structured, alive with invisible activity. Motion loses its certainty and begins resembling an emergent appearance generated by deeper processes. Even the darkness between galaxies no longer feels truly empty. Quantum fluctuations constantly shimmer beneath the vacuum. Virtual particles briefly emerge and vanish. Fields stretch silently across billions of light years. Space itself expands while carrying entire galaxies apart faster and faster. The cosmos is not a still void through which objects travel. It is a dynamic fabric continuously evolving from within, and perhaps light never truly crosses this fabric at all. Perhaps what humans interpret as motion is only the visible surface of interactions occurring inside a deeper, timeless structure. A structure where separation itself is not ultimate, where beginnings and endings connect more directly than ordinary perception allows, where photons do not journey through emptiness so much as participate in relationships spanning reality itself. As the mind slowly drifts deeper into the silence of these ideas, the universe begins feeling less mechanical and more mysterious. Space no longer appears as a giant empty container. It becomes something active and unknowable, woven together with time, fields, energy, and observation into one continuous, hidden architecture. And somewhere inside that architecture, light may not be moving at all. One of the strangest assumptions human beings rarely question is the idea that reality unfolds smoothly. The mind naturally imagines the universe as a continuous flow, where objects pass through every intermediate position while traveling from one place to another. A bird crossing the sky occupies countless points along its path. A falling leaf drifts gradually downward through air. Motion feels fluid, uninterrupted, seamless. Even time itself appears to flow continuously, carrying existence forward one moment after another, like an invisible river. But beneath ordinary perception, physics has uncovered hints that continuity itself may be an illusion. The first signs emerged long before quantum mechanics fully developed. Ancient philosophers already noticed something unsettling about motion. If an object must cross half a distance before crossing the full distance, and half of the remaining distance before continuing further, then movement seems to involve infinitely many subdivisions. A journey becomes mathematically strange. To move anywhere at all, an object would need to complete infinitely many smaller transitions first. At human scales, the paradox feels irrelevant because motion appears effortless. Yet deep beneath appearances, the structure of continuity remains mysterious even today. Modern physics inherited this problem in an entirely new form. Quantum mechanics revealed that reality behaves in discrete ways surprisingly often. Electrons occupy specific energy levels instead of smoothly existing between them. Light arrives in quantized packets called photons. Even fields fluctuate in granular amounts. The universe repeatedly resists infinite smoothness, and this raises an unsettling possibility. What if motion itself is not continuous? What if the flowing world humans experience is actually composed of transitions between discrete states, while the sensation of uninterrupted movement emerges only because consciousness stitches those states together into a seamless narrative? The idea sounds almost impossible at first because human awareness depends so deeply on continuity. You do not feel yourself blinking between separate moments. Experience appears smooth. Memory links one instant into another naturally. But perception itself may already function through reconstruction. The brain constantly assembles sensory information into coherent reality, filling gaps invisibly. Much of what feels immediate is already interpretation. Physics may be revealing a similar structure beneath existence itself. At the quantum level, particles often do not appear to move through intermediate positions in ordinary ways. Instead, systems evolve as probability distributions until interaction forces a definite outcome. An electron surrounding an atom does not orbit the nucleus like a miniature planet. Before measurement, it exists as a spread of possible locations described by a wave function. Only when interaction occurs does one specific result emerge. This is profoundly difficult to visualize because human intuition keeps demanding hidden trajectories underneath. The mind wants to imagine the electrons secretly possessing a definite path all along. Yet, experiment after experiment refuses to confirm such hidden continuous motion cleanly. Instead, reality behaves as though possibilities exist prior to observation, not definite moving objects. Light demonstrates this mystery perfectly. When photons create interference patterns, the mathematics does not describe one tiny particle continuously weaving through space like a microscopic insect. Instead, the equations evolve as overlapping probability amplitudes spreading across multiple possibilities simultaneously. The final observed outcome appears localized, but the process leading there resists ordinary pictures of motion entirely. And perhaps that resistance is meaningful. Perhaps the universe underneath observation does not evolve through continuous trajectories at all. Perhaps reality transitions between relationships, while continuity emerges only at larger scales, where countless interactions blur together into smooth experience. There is an analogy hidden inside modern digital technology that strangely mirrors this possibility. Movies appear fluid when projected on screens, yet they are composed of separate still frames presented rapidly in sequence. The mind reconstructs continuity from discrete images. Video games simulate movement through constantly updated states. Even sound recordings reduce flowing vibrations into sampled information points. Human consciousness naturally smooths fragmentation into continuity. Now imagine reality itself operating similarly at the deepest level, not as a perfectly continuous flow, but as an immense quantum structure transitioning between informational states faster and more subtly than conscious awareness could ever directly perceive. Under this view, motion becomes something emergent rather than fundamental. Objects do not necessarily travel continuously through space. Instead, relationships between states evolve according to underlying rules, while observers embedded within the system experience the result as movement. This idea becomes even stranger near the smallest scales physics can currently imagine. There exists a length called the Planck length, unimaginably tiny, where ordinary concepts of space may cease functioning entirely. Likewise, the Planck time represents a scale below which the notion of sequential moments may lose physical meaning. Scientists do not yet possess a complete theory uniting quantum mechanics and gravity, but many suspect that space-time itself becomes fundamentally different at these scales. Some approaches to quantum gravity even suggest that space-time may emerge from discrete informational structures rather than existing as a smooth continuum. Space could be granular, time could be relational. The universe may not resemble an infinitely flowing fabric beneath perception, but something more abstract and fragmented underneath. And if space-time itself is emergent, then continuous motion through space-time may also be emergent. The implications slowly begin changing how existence feels emotionally once the mind truly absorbs them. Reality becomes less like a giant machine unfolding smoothly through emptiness and more like a hidden process, continuously reconstructing itself from beneath perception. The familiar world remains stable and real at human scales, yet underneath that stability lies something profoundly unfamiliar. Light again occupies a uniquely mysterious position within this picture, because photons exist at the boundary where ordinary notions of space and time begin collapsing completely. Relativity removes proper time from light's perspective. Quantum mechanics removes definite trajectories. The result is deeply unsettling. Light appears to connect events without clearly participating in continuous motion the way human intuition expects. Perhaps this is why photons seem almost ghost-like in physics. They carry energy and momentum. They produce measurable effects, yet attempts to picture exactly how they move repeatedly fail. The deeper the mathematics becomes, the more the ordinary image of a tiny object traveling continuously through darkness starts dissolving into abstraction. And maybe that abstraction points towards something true. Perhaps the universe does not fundamentally consist of things moving through space. Perhaps reality is made of transitions between relationships, probabilities, and interactions unfolding within deeper structures beyond ordinary perception. Motion may simply be the large-scale appearance generated by those transitions when observed from inside consciousness. Even human identity begins feeling slightly unstable under this perspective. Your body replaces atoms constantly. Neural activity flickers through electrochemical patterns. Thoughts emerge and vanish. Memory reconstructs continuity across changing states. The feeling of being one continuous self moving through time may already depend on the brain's ability to organize fragmented processes into coherent experience. In a strange way, the universe and consciousness may share a similar architecture. Both appear continuous from within. Both may hide fragmentation underneath. And both rely on relationships more than isolated objects. Tonight, as the world grows quieter and the boundary between thought and imagination softens, it becomes possible to feel the unsettling beauty inside this idea. The possibility that continuity itself is not fundamental, that beneath flowing rivers of time and motion lies a deeper structure built from transitions too subtle for human senses to directly perceive. A universe where stars do not truly send light traveling endlessly through emptiness. A universe where motion emerges from hidden relationships. A universe where reality reconstructs itself moment after moment beneath the surface of awareness. And somewhere inside that invisible reconstruction, light may never actually move at all. There is a deeply human tendency to imagine time as something universal, a giant invisible current flowing equally for everything in existence. The stars age, galaxies evolve, hearts beat, civilizations rise and disappear. Every event seems carried forward by the same endless river. And because human beings experience life sequentially, one moment unfolding after another, it becomes almost impossible to imagine reality existing any other way. Time feels absolute. continuous, shared by all things equally. But light quietly destroys that assumption, not metaphorically, not philosophically, literally. The deeper Einstein explored the structure of reality, the more he realized that time does not behave the way human intuition expects. It stretches, compresses, slows down, speeds up. Two observers moving differently through space will not agree on how much time has passed. Gravity itself alters the rate at which moments unfold. The universe possesses no single universal clock, ticking identically everywhere at once. Instead, time becomes entangled with motion and geometry in ways so strange that ordinary language struggles to contain them. And at the very center of this strange structure sits light, because light occupies a position unlike anything else in the universe. No object with mass can ever reach the speed of light. The equations forbid it completely. As velocity increases, energy requirements rise enormously, approaching infinity near light speed itself. The universe appears structured around this ultimate limit. And yet photons, the particles associated with light, exist naturally at that speed from the moment they are created. They do not accelerate up toward it. They simply exist there immediately, as though light belongs to an entirely different category of existence from ordinary matter. But the truly unsettling part emerges when relativity asks what happens to time at such velocities. The answer changes everything. As an object moves faster through space, time slows relative to stationary observers. This effect is not illusion. It is measurable reality. Precise atomic clocks placed aboard fast-moving aircraft genuinely experience slightly less time than clocks remaining on Earth. Particles accelerated near light speed survive far longer than they normally should because time itself dilates for them. The universe literally allows motion through space to alter motion through time. And as velocity approaches the speed of light, this effect becomes increasingly extreme. For light itself, the equations suggest something almost impossible to visualize. From the photon's frame, if such a frame can meaningfully exist at all, no time passes whatsoever between emission and absorption. None. A photon released inside a distant galaxy billions of years ago crosses the expanding universe and eventually reaches an observer on Earth. From the human perspective, the journey required billions of years. Entire stars were born and destroyed during its travel. Oceans formed, continents shifted, species evolved, civilizations emerged beneath changing skies. Yet, according to relativity, the photon itself experiences no duration between beginning and end. The departure and arrival become strangely adjacent. This idea is so alien to ordinary intuition that the mind instinctively tries to reject it. Human consciousness cannot truly imagine timelessness because all thought unfolds sequentially. Every emotion, memory, sensation, and perception occurs within time. Even imagining a timeless state requires time to think about it. Consciousness itself may depend fundamentally on temporal flow, and yet light appears to inhabit a boundary where that flow collapses. The implications become profoundly unsettling once you sit quietly with them long enough, because motion normally requires time. To travel from one location to another, duration must pass. A car crossing a road requires seconds. A planet orbiting a star requires years. Even a heartbeat unfolds through intervals. Motion without time seems meaningless. If no time passes, what does it actually mean to say something moved? This is where the ordinary image of light as a tiny glowing object racing through darkness begins falling apart completely. Perhaps photons do not experience travel in any meaningful sense at all. Perhaps what humans interpret as motion is only the appearance generated from within our own temporal perspective. From inside time, light appears to cross space, but outside ordinary temporal intuition, the distinction between departure and arrival may lose its meaning entirely. Imagine folding a piece of paper so that two distant points suddenly touch. From the perspective of a tiny creature walking along the paper's surface, the journey appears long. But from outside that surface, the separation collapses instantly. Relativity creates something emotionally similar around light. Human observers embedded within time witness enormous journeys across space. Yet the deeper geometry connecting those events may not resemble travel the way human beings instinctively imagine it. And this possibility begins changing the emotional atmosphere of the universe itself. Space no longer feels empty and separate in the same way. Distance loses some of its solidity. The cosmos becomes less like isolated objects drifting through a void, and more like a connected structure where events relate across hidden geometries beneath ordinary perception. Modern physics repeatedly hints toward this interconnectedness. Quantum entanglement already suggests that particles can become linked in ways transcending ordinary spatial separation. Two entangled particles share correlations instantly, regardless of distance, as though the deeper quantum structure connecting them ignores classical separation altogether. Relativity reveals that space and time themselves form one unified geometry. Quantum field theory dissolves particles into excitations of fields, extending everywhere simultaneously. Again and again, reality resists the human tendency to divide existence into separate objects, moving independently through emptiness. And light sits at the crossroads of all these revelations. The strange thing is that humanity built its entire perception of reality around light long before understanding any of this. Every visible memory depends on photons. The face of a parent during childhood, the first sunrise seen alone, reflections trembling across rain-covered streets at night, the stars overhead during moments of loneliness or wonder. All of it arrived through light entering the nervous system. Human beings trust vision deeply because sight feels immediate and real. Yet the very thing carrying visual reality behaves in ways that challenge the foundations of ordinary existence itself. The more physicists learned about light, the more impossible it became to describe using simple, everyday concepts. Is light a wave, a particle, a field excitation, a probability distribution, a relationship between events? Somehow, it behaves partially like all of these and fully like none of them. Every description captures fragments while missing something essential, and perhaps that difficulty reveals a deeper limitation within human thought itself. The brain evolved to survive among medium-sized objects, moving slowly compared to light speed. Human intuition was never designed to understand quantum mechanics or relativistic geometry. The universe underneath ordinary experience may simply be too strange for biological instincts to visualize directly. Yet mathematics continues revealing that strangeness, whether intuition approves or not. There is something emotionally haunting about this realization. The stars above suddenly feel different, not merely distant burning spheres scattering photons across emptiness, but participants in a hidden structure connecting space, time, fields, and observation together in ways the conscious mind can barely grasp. Even darkness itself begins feeling less empty. Between galaxies, quantum fields fluctuate endlessly. Space-time curves around invisible masses. Ancient photons drift silently through expanding cosmic geometry. Entire nebulae glow with radiation released long before human civilization existed. Everywhere the universe pulses with interactions beneath ordinary perception, and through all of it, light remains deeply mysterious, not just because of what it is, but because of what it reveals about time itself. Perhaps time is not fundamental in the way humans imagine. Perhaps temporal flow emerges from deeper relationships hidden underneath reality. Some physicists already suspect this may be true. Certain approaches to quantum gravity imply that time itself could emerge from entanglement structures or informational relationships rather than existing as a primary ingredient of the universe. If that is true, then light's strange timelessness may not be an anomaly at all. It may instead hint toward the deeper architecture beneath space-time itself, a reality where separation is less absolute than it appears, a reality where movement and duration emerge from hidden structures, a reality where photons do not truly journey across the cosmos, but instead connect events within an underlying geometry beyond ordinary time. The longer the mind rests inside these ideas, the more existence begins feeling dreamlike in the most beautiful possible way. Not unreal, but layered, structured beneath the surface by invisible principles, stranger than everyday life allows people to notice. The world remains tangible. Trees still sway in wind. Cities still glow beneath midnight skies. Oceans still reflect moonlight. Yet underneath those familiar experiences lies a universe operating according to rules far more mysterious than human intuition once believed possible. And somewhere inside that hidden architecture, light may not be moving through time at all. Perhaps it never was. Human beings rarely notice how deeply they trust space. Without thinking about it, the mind assumes that space is the fundamental arena of existence. Everything appears inside it. Stars hang within it. Bodies move through it. Galaxies drift across unimaginable cosmic distances, while empty space stretches endlessly between them. Even thought itself feels located somewhere behind the eyes, as though consciousness exists inside a position within a larger spatial world. Space feels so natural that questioning its reality almost sounds meaningless, and yet modern physics has slowly pushed toward a possibility so unsettling that it changes the emotional texture of existence itself. A possibility that many physicists now take seriously, even if no one fully understands its implications yet. What if space is not fundamental? What if distance, location, and separation are not the deepest layer of reality, but instead emerge from something even more abstract beneath perception? At first, this sounds impossible because human experience depends entirely on spatial intuition. Every object appears somewhere. Every movement crosses distance. Even imagination borrows the language of location. We speak of ideas being close, emotions feeling far away, memories being distant. The structure of thought itself seems built upon spatial metaphors. But physics has repeatedly shown that the universe underneath ordinary perception does not necessarily obey the categories human intuition evolved to understand. The first major fracture appeared through relativity. Einstein revealed that space is not fixed and absolute. Distance changes depending on motion. Simultaneity breaks apart between observers. Space and time merge into a unified structure called spacetime, where geometry itself bends in response to mass and energy. Gravity is no longer a force pulling objects through emptiness. Instead, massive objects reshape the geometry of spacetime itself. Already, this transforms space from passive emptiness into something dynamic and flexible. But quantum mechanics introduced an even deeper rupture, because quantum entanglement began suggesting that separation itself may not behave fundamentally the way humans expect. two entangled particles can become connected so deeply that measuring one immediately determines the state of the other, regardless of how far apart they are. One particle may remain on Earth while the other drifts beyond the solar system, yet their quantum states remain linked. Einstein himself found this deeply disturbing and called it spooky action at a distance. The universe appeared to permit relationships transcending ordinary spatial separation. At first, physicists hoped hidden variables might preserve classical locality underneath the mystery. But experiment after experiment continued supporting quantum mechanics instead. Reality itself seemed less locally separated than human intuition demanded. And gradually, a radical possibility emerged. Perhaps entanglement is not occurring across space. Perhaps space itself emerges from entanglement. This idea sounds almost mystical until the mathematics begins pointing toward it repeatedly. Some modern approaches to theoretical physics suggest that space-time geometry may arise from deeper quantum informational relationships. Instead of particles existing inside space, space itself could emerge from patterns of quantum connectivity. In this picture, what humans perceive as physical distance may only reflect the strength and structure of underlying relationships. The universe begins resembling something profoundly unfamiliar. Not a giant container filled with objects, not a cosmic emptiness where matter drifts independently, but a network of relationships from which space itself emerges secondarily. The emotional effect of this realization can feel strangely destabilizing at first. Human beings rely heavily on separation. You feel distinct from distant stars because enormous stretches of space appear to divide you from them. You feel isolated from ancient galaxies because they seem unimaginably far away. Distance creates psychological boundaries between things. But if space is emergent rather than fundamental, then separation itself becomes less absolute than it appears. At the deepest level, reality may possess a hidden connectedness, impossible to perceive directly through ordinary senses. And suddenly light becomes mysterious in an entirely new way. Because if space itself is emergent, what exactly does it mean for light to move through space? The old intuitive picture begins collapsing completely. Photons no longer resemble tiny glowing bullets traveling across a pre-existing void. Instead, light may represent relationships, unfolding within a deeper structure from which spatial geometry itself arises. Motion becomes increasingly difficult to define. This strange direction in physics appears again and again across different theories. The holographic principle suggests that information describing a region of space may actually exist encoded on a lower dimensional boundary. Some approaches to quantum gravity imply space-time emerges from entanglement networks. Other theories describe geometry itself as arising from informational relationships between quantum states. Again and again, the universe refuses to behave like ordinary intuition expects. And perhaps the reason this feels emotionally strange is because humans evolved inside emergent reality rather than beneath it. A fish does not naturally perceive the molecular structure of water. Likewise, consciousness may naturally perceive emergent space without directly sensing the deeper architecture generating it. Human awareness experiences location, distance, and motion because those concepts function reliably at biological scales. But beneath those scales, reality may organize itself according to principles far more abstract than geometry alone. Even language begins failing here, because language evolved to describe human scale experience. Words like inside, outside, near, far, and through all assume space already exists fundamentally. Trying to describe a reality where space itself emerges from deeper relationships becomes almost impossible without borrowing metaphors from the very system being questioned. And still, the mathematics keeps pointing towards something beyond ordinary geometry. There is something hauntingly beautiful about this possibility once the mind stops resisting it. The stars above begin feeling different, not isolated objects scattered randomly through empty darkness, but visible expressions of deeper, hidden relationships woven throughout reality itself. The night sky transforms from a collection of distant points into a surface appearance generated by structures too profound for ordinary perception to fully comprehend. Even human existence begins feeling less isolated. Every atom in your body emerged from ancient stars. Every breath exchanges particles with the wider earth continuously. Electromagnetic fields pass through your body endlessly. Gravity links you to every mass in the observable universe. Quantum fields stretch invisibly through all things simultaneously. The sense of being a completely separate object inside empty space may already be partly illusion. And perhaps light reveals this more clearly than anything else, because light constantly undermines the ordinary categories humans rely upon. It behaves both like particle and wave. It experiences no passage of time. It resists definite trajectories before observation. It connects events across cosmic distances while existing at the boundary where space-time itself begins behaving strangely. Again and again, light appears, less like a thing moving through space and more like evidence that the structure of reality is fundamentally different from human intuition. The deeper you sit quietly with these ideas, the more the universe begins feeling almost alive with hidden architecture. Beneath visible appearances lies something vast and interconnected, where geometry, time, matter, and observation emerge together from deeper processes. A universe where distance may not ultimately separate things. A universe where motion may not fundamentally exist. A universe where photons do not truly cross emptiness because emptiness itself is not what it appears to be. Tonight, while the world grows softer and quieter around you, it becomes possible to imagine existence differently. Not as isolated objects scattered across a cold void, but as patterns emerging from invisible relationships beneath perception. A reality where space itself slowly crystallizes out of deeper structures, hidden underneath ordinary awareness. And somewhere inside those hidden structures, light may never actually move through space at all, because perhaps space itself was never truly there to cross. Long before modern physics existed, human beings imagined reality as something solid and definite. The world appeared built from objects possessing clear boundaries and permanent properties. A mountain was simply a mountain. A stone occupied one place at one time. The stars moved predictably across the heavens, while the earth beneath human feet felt stable and unmoving. Existence appeared concrete, mechanical, understandable through direct observation. And for a while, this picture seemed to work beautifully. Classical physics transformed the universe into an immense cosmic machine governed by precise laws. If someone knew the position and motion of every particle at one moment, then in theory, the entire future of the universe could be predicted perfectly. Reality became deterministic. Every event unfolded inevitably from prior conditions. Motion was continuous. Time flowed universally. Space provided the stage. Matter moved across it like gears inside an unimaginably vast clock. There was comfort in this vision. A mechanical universe feels emotionally stable because it behaves predictably. Even death becomes part of an ordered system. Every star, every storm, every heartbeat follows lawful motion through space-time. Human beings could imagine themselves living inside a reality fundamentally understandable through logic alone. But then quantum mechanics arrived and quietly shattered that certainty forever. At first, the changes seemed technical, almost mathematical. Tiny irregularities appeared inside experiments involving atoms and radiation. Light behaved strangely. Electrons refused to follow predictable orbits. Energy appeared quantized instead of continuous. The microscopic world stopped behaving like classical objects entirely. And the deeper physicists investigated, the stranger reality became. Because quantum mechanics did not merely reveal unknown details hiding beneath classical physics, it replaced the entire framework underneath reality itself. The universe stopped looking like a machine made from definite objects moving predictably through space. Instead, it began resembling a field of possibilities. This transformation is difficult to emotionally absorb because human intuition desperately wants the world to remain concrete underneath observation. The mind instinctively assumes that objects possess definite properties, whether anyone looks at them or not. A chair exists in one location. A planet occupies a definite position in space. A photon must surely travel along one actual path, even if humans cannot measure it directly. But quantum mechanics repeatedly undermines that assumption. Before interaction occurs, physical systems often behave as though they exist in multiple possible states simultaneously. An electron surrounding an atom does not occupy one precise location before measurement. Instead, it exists as a spread of probabilities described mathematically by a wave function. Only when interaction forces an outcome does one particular possibility become observable. And this strange behavior is not limited to electrons. Photons behave similarly. Light crossing an experiment does not always act like a tiny object traveling through one definite route. Instead, the mathematics describes overlapping possibilities evolving together until interaction collapses those possibilities into one measurable event. This is where reality begins feeling deeply unfamiliar. Because if light exists partly as a possibility before observation, then what exactly is moving through space? The question becomes increasingly difficult to answer. In ordinary life, movement belongs to objects. A bird crosses the sky because the bird occupies continuous positions through time. But quantum systems do not always possess definite positions before interaction. Instead, probabilities evolve, possibilities interfere, outcomes emerge. The universe underneath perception begins resembling something less material and more abstract, not a collection of tiny solid things, but a hidden structure of evolving potentials. And perhaps the emotional discomfort this creates comes from the way human consciousness experiences certainty. The brain continuously stabilizes reality into concrete objects because survival depends on reliable perception. Ambiguous possibility is dangerous biologically. Human awareness evolved to simplify the world into definite things moving predictably through space and time. But the universe itself may not fundamentally operate that way. Beneath ordinary perception may exist only relationships between probabilities, with stable reality emerging secondarily through interaction. The deeper physicists explored this idea, the stranger existence became. One of the most unsettling aspects of quantum mechanics involves superposition. A quantum system can exist in multiple potential states simultaneously until measured. This is not merely ignorance about a hidden, definite condition. The mathematics treats the possibilities themselves as physically meaningful. A photon can behave as though it traveled through multiple paths simultaneously. An electron can exist as a spread of locations. Even entire atoms have been placed into superpositions experimentally. The implications slowly become almost philosophical. Reality before observation may not resemble reality after observation. And light sits directly at the center of this mystery because photons repeatedly reveal the probabilistic structure underneath existence. When physicists perform interference experiments, each photon contributes to patterns suggesting that all possible paths influence the outcome simultaneously. Richard Feynman eventually described quantum mechanics through the sum over histories approach, where particles explore every possible trajectory between events. The final observable behavior emerges from interference between these possibilities. Human intuition struggles profoundly with this idea because it wants to picture one actual root hidden underneath. Yet the mathematics succeeds precisely because it abandons the classical need for definite motion entirely. And perhaps that abandonment points towards something true about the universe itself. Perhaps possibility is more fundamental than matter. Perhaps reality is not built from tiny objects carrying themselves continuously through space, but from evolving structures of potential interaction. Under this view, motion becomes secondary. What humans perceive as traveling objects may actually be sequences of interactions emerging from deeper, probabilistic fields beneath perception. The universe starts feeling less mechanical and more dreamlike, though not in the sense of being unreal. Rather, reality begins resembling something fluid and relational instead of rigidly material. The distinction matters enormously. A dream feels unstable because it lacks lawful consistency. Quantum reality, by contrast, follows mathematical laws with extraordinary precision. But those laws describe possibilities rather than classical certainty. This creates one of the strangest emotional tensions in all of science. The universe is simultaneously lawful and indeterminate, structured and uncertain, predictable statistically while resisting definite narratives underneath observation. And nowhere is this tension more visible than in light itself. Light behaves as though it occupies multiple possibilities before interaction, yet arrives at detectors as definite, localized events. It spreads like a wave and arrives like a particle. It experiences no proper time and yet connects events across cosmic distances. Every attempt to force light fully into classical categories fails eventually, because perhaps the categories themselves are wrong. Human beings naturally divide reality into objects moving through space and time because biological perception depends on those distinctions. But quantum mechanics hints that beneath observation, the universe may consist primarily of relationships between probabilities instead. Even vacuum itself reflects this hidden instability. Empty space is not truly empty. Quantum fields fluctuate continuously. Virtual particles emerge briefly before vanishing again. The vacuum seethes invisibly with temporary possibilities, constantly appearing and disappearing beneath ordinary perception. Reality is restless underneath. The universe is not a frozen collection of static things. It is an ongoing process of potential becoming actual, and light may represent one of the clearest expressions of this process, because photons do not merely illuminate objects for human eyes. They expose the probabilistic architecture underneath existence itself. Every visible image you have ever experienced depended on quantum interactions involving electromagnetic fields. Every color, every reflection, every distant star. Human perception already rests upon quantum processes continuously unfolding beneath awareness. The familiar world appears stable only because enormous numbers of interactions average together into classical certainty at large scales. But underneath that certainty, possibility still shimmers quietly. This realization changes the emotional atmosphere of the cosmos once the mind fully settles into it. The universe no longer feels cold and mechanical. Instead, it feels alive with hidden potential. Reality becomes something continuously emerging rather than something permanently fixed. Even the night sky transforms emotionally under this perspective. The stars are no longer merely giant burning objects scattered through emptiness. They become visible surfaces emerging from deeper quantum structures extending across spacetime itself. Ancient photons arriving at your eyes carry evidence of a universe far stranger than ordinary perception suggests. Every beam of starlight becomes a reminder that reality underneath appearances may consist less of solid matter and more of evolving possibilities. And perhaps this is why light feels so emotionally powerful to human beings. Not simply because it allows vision, but because light quietly reveals that existence itself may not yet be fully decided until interaction occurs. Tonight, while darkness gathers softly around the edges of awareness, it becomes possible to imagine the universe differently. Not as a rigid machine, unfolding inevitably through empty space, but as an immense field of possibilities, continuously shaping itself into reality through interaction and observation. A cosmos where certainty emerges slowly from probability. A cosmos where matter itself arises from deeper, invisible fields. A cosmos where motion may only be the appearance generated when possibility crystallizes into experience. And somewhere inside that endless ocean of quantum potential, light may never truly travel at all. Perhaps it simply connects possibilities across the hidden architecture of reality itself. There is a strange and deeply unsettling possibility hidden inside modern physics, one that most people encounter only briefly before instinctively turning away from it. Not because it is mathematically impossible, but because it feels emotionally dangerous to think about for too long. The possibility is this: reality may not exist in a fully definite form until interaction occurs. And if that is true, then observation itself may play a far deeper role in existence than human beings once believed possible. For centuries, science moved steadily away from the human observer. Ancient civilizations placed consciousness at the center of the cosmos. The stars revolved around humanity. Reality existed for human experience. But modern science dismantled that comforting picture piece by piece. Earth became just another planet. The sun became one ordinary star among billions. The Milky Way became one galaxy among trillions. Human beings appeared increasingly insignificant within a cold and indifferent universe governed by impersonal laws. And yet quantum mechanics quietly reintroduced the observer in the strangest possible way. Not spiritually, not symbolically, physically. Because the act of measurement in quantum mechanics does not behave like passive watching. Observation changes outcomes. Interaction forces possibilities into definite states. Before measurement, systems evolve as overlapping probabilities. After measurement, one result appears concretely. The implications of this remain controversial, even among physicists, because nobody fully agrees on what quantum mechanics ultimately means. Different interpretations attempt to preserve different intuitions about reality. Some interpretations suggest the wave function physically collapses during observation. Others argue all possibilities continue existing across branching universes. Some claim consciousness itself matters. Others insist interaction alone is sufficient. Some reject the entire question as fundamentally unanswerable. But despite these disagreements, the mystery itself remains unavoidable. Reality behaves differently before and after observation, and light reveals this mystery more clearly than almost anything else in the universe. Imagine again the famous double-slit experiment. A photon approaches a barrier containing two narrow openings. If nobody measures which slit the photon passes through, an interference pattern emerges, suggesting the photon explored multiple paths simultaneously like a wave. But the moment detectors are placed to observe the photon's path, the interference disappears. Suddenly, the photon behaves like a localized particle choosing one route. Observation changes reality. This statement sounds simple at first, but emotionally absorbing it is another matter entirely. Human intuition desperately wants a hidden story underneath. The mind wants to believe the photon always possessed a definite path, and measurement merely revealed it. But experiment after experiment continues supporting the stranger interpretation instead. Before observation, reality may genuinely exist in an unresolved state of possibility. And this creates a deeply unsettling tension concerning the nature of existence itself. Because what exactly counts as an observer? Does reality remain indefinite until a conscious mind perceives it? Or does any interaction qualify as measurement? Does a photon become definite when striking a detector, or only when information enters awareness? Physicists still debate these questions because quantum mechanics predicts outcomes extraordinarily well, while remaining philosophically mysterious underneath. Yet, regardless of interpretation, one thing becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Human beings are not detached from reality in the way classical physics once imagined. Observation participates in the unfolding structure of the universe itself. The emotional impact of this idea grows stronger the longer you sit quietly with it. Throughout ordinary life, consciousness feels secondary. Thoughts appear trapped inside skulls, while the external world continues independently outside. Reality seems fixed and objective, whether anyone looks at it or not. Mountains remain mountains in darkness. Stars continue burning beyond human sight. Galaxies drift silently through cosmic space, regardless of observation. And at large scales, this remains functionally true. But quantum mechanics hints that beneath classical stability lies something more, fluid, where definiteness emerges gradually through interaction rather than existing fully formed from the beginning. The universe begins feeling less like a finished structure and more like an ongoing process continuously resolving itself. And perhaps light sits at the center of this process, because light mediates almost every act of visual observation humans experience. Every face you have ever seen, every landscape, every memory of moonlight or sunsets or distant stars, all of it arrived through photons interacting with your nervous system. Human consciousness builds its image of reality through light, yet light itself behaves according to laws that undermine the certainty of objective, independent existence. This creates one of the strangest emotional loops in science. The very thing allowing human beings to perceive the universe also reveals that perception may not be as separate from reality as classical intuition assumes. Some physicists attempted to avoid this discomfort by interpreting quantum mechanics purely mathematically, refusing to speculate about deeper meaning. Shut up and calculate became an unofficial philosophy among certain scientists frustrated by endless philosophical debates. The equations worked. Technology based on quantum mechanics worked. Why obsess over interpretation? But human consciousness naturally seeks meaning beneath equations. Mathematics predicts outcomes beautifully, yet the emotional question remains unanswered. What kind of universe behaves this way? Why does reality seem probabilistic before interaction? Why does light appear to explore multiple possibilities before observation? Why does measurement force resolution? The deeper one reflects on these questions, the stranger existence itself begins to feel. Perhaps the world humans experience is not fully separate from participation within it. Perhaps reality emerges relationally, through interactions between systems, rather than existing as isolated independent objects. Under this perspective, the universe becomes less like a giant machine unfolding mechanically, and more like an interconnected web continuously shaping itself through relationships. This possibility appears increasingly natural within quantum field theory as well. Fields permeate all of space. Particles emerge through interactions within those fields. Observation involves exchanges of energy and information. Reality becomes process rather than static substance. Even identity itself begins softening under this perspective. The body you call yourself is not a permanently fixed object. Atoms flow continuously in and out through breathing, eating, and cellular replacement. Neural activity flickers constantly through dynamic electrochemical patterns. Consciousness emerges from ongoing processes rather than remaining frozen permanently. The self feels stable because memory creates continuity across change. And perhaps reality itself operates similarly, stable at large scales, fluid underneath. This strange blending between observer and observed becomes even more haunting when combined with relativity and light's relationship to time. Remember that photons experience no proper time between emission and absorption. From the geometry of relativity, beginning and end collapse together for light itself. Yet those same photons participate in acts of observation throughout the universe: vision, measurement, detection, interaction. All depend fundamentally upon light connecting events. The cosmos begins resembling an immense network of relationships rather than separate objects drifting independently through emptiness. A universe where interaction defines reality more deeply than isolated existence. A universe where possibility becomes actuality through connection. A universe where observation participates in the unfolding structure of being itself. And this does not make reality imaginary or dependent on human thought in some simplistic mystical sense. Mountains do not vanish when nobody looks at them. Stars do not cease existing beyond human sight. Quantum mechanics does not imply consciousness magically creates the universe from nothing. The mystery is subtler than that. Reality may simply be relational at its deepest level. Definiteness may emerge through interaction rather than existing fundamentally beforehand. And human consciousness, built from interactions itself, exists inside that process rather than outside it. The night sky feels different once this realization truly settles into the mind. The stars no longer appear as distant, isolated objects, merely sending light across empty space. Instead, every visible point becomes part of an ongoing interaction spanning space-time itself. Ancient photons entering human eyes complete relationships billions of years in the making. Observation becomes participation within cosmic structure. Even silence feels different. You begin sensing that underneath ordinary reality lies something alive with unresolved possibility, continuously shaping itself through countless interactions unfolding across invisible quantum fields. And perhaps motion itself belongs to this emergent layer of experience. Perhaps photons do not truly travel through a fully definite universe. Perhaps reality itself only crystallizes gradually through relationships between observer and observed. Perhaps the world humans perceive as flowing through space and time emerges from something deeper, where separation, certainty, and movement have not yet fully formed. Tonight, as thought slowly drifts deeper into stillness, it becomes possible to imagine consciousness not as something trapped inside the universe, but as something woven into the universe's unfolding structure itself, not central, not separate, but participating quietly in the endless transformation of possibility into experience. A cosmos where reality is not fully written in advance, a cosmos where observation matters, a cosmos where light does not merely illuminate existence, but helps shape the visible world from beneath. And somewhere inside that hidden process, motion itself may only be part of the illusion observers experience, while reality resolves around them. There is a moment that sometimes arrives late at night, when the world becomes quiet enough that ordinary perception begins to loosen slightly around the edges. Familiar things stop feeling entirely familiar. The room around you still exists. The walls remain solid. The distant hum of the world continues somewhere beyond hearing. Yet something subtle changes in the atmosphere of thought itself. Reality begins feeling less obvious, less fixed. The mind starts sensing that beneath the ordinary surface of existence, there may be structures hidden so deeply that human beings only glimpse them indirectly through mathematics, intuition, and strange flashes of philosophical unease. Modern physics has increasingly moved toward exactly this feeling, not toward mysticism, but toward hidden structure. Again and again, the deeper scientists investigate the universe, the more ordinary appearances begin dissolving into abstractions underneath. Matter becomes fields, particles become excitations, time becomes relative, space bends and stretches, motion loses certainty, probability replaces determinism, observation alters outcomes, and beneath all of it emerges a growing suspicion that reality may possess an underlying geometry, far stranger than anything human senses directly perceive. Light has guided humanity toward this realization at every step. Because light does not behave like ordinary objects, it behaves more like evidence, a clue pointing toward a deeper architecture beneath visible existence. The strange thing is that geometry has always quietly governed reality, even before human beings understood it. The planets move according to geometry. Gravity shapes trajectories through space-time geometry. Light bends around massive objects because geometry itself curves in the presence of mass and energy. Even the expansion of the universe reflects geometric properties woven into space-time itself. But quantum physics suggests that beneath space-time lies something even more fundamental, where geometry may emerge from structures unrelated to ordinary distance entirely. This possibility begins sounding almost impossible because human intuition treats geometry as foundational. Space seems self-evidently real. Points possess locations. Distances separate objects. Shapes occupy dimensions. Geometry appears built into existence itself. Yet the deeper theoretical physics progresses, the more space-time begins resembling a secondary phenomenon rather than the deepest layer of reality. One of the reasons physicists suspect this comes from the impossible tension between general relativity and quantum mechanics. Relativity describes space-time as smooth and continuous. Quantum mechanics introduces uncertainty, discreteness, and probabilistic behavior. Both theories work astonishingly well in their respective domains, yet they refuse to combine cleanly into one unified description of reality. This mathematical incompatibility suggests something profound. Perhaps space-time itself is not fundamental enough to survive at the deepest scales. Perhaps beneath ordinary geometry lies a hidden structure from which space and time emerge only approximately. the way temperature emerges from microscopic molecular motion. Temperature feels real at human scales, yet individual atoms do not possess temperature themselves. Likewise, spacetime may feel fundamental to conscious observers, while actually emerging from deeper relationships beneath perception. Some physicists now suspect that quantum entanglement may play a central role in generating geometry itself. This idea remains deeply strange emotionally because entanglement already challenges ordinary intuition. Two particles become linked so completely that their properties remain correlated regardless of distance. Classical separation weakens. The universe behaves less like isolated objects and more like interconnected relationships. But if entanglement generates space-time geometry, then distance itself becomes secondary. Objects are not connected across space. Space emerges from connection. The implications slowly become staggering. Imagine reality not as a giant three-dimensional container filled with matter, but as an immense informational structure where relationships generate the appearance of geometry. Space would no longer be the stage where events occur. Instead, space itself would crystallize out of deeper patterns hidden beneath ordinary awareness. And if geometry emerges relationally, then movement through geometry may also emerge relationally. This possibility transforms the meaning of motion entirely. Human intuition imagines objects crossing pre-existing space continuously. But if space itself arises from changing relationships, then motion becomes less like traveling through a container and more like transformations within an underlying network structure. Light again becomes uniquely mysterious under this perspective, because photons already resist ordinary descriptions of movement. They experience no proper time. They behave probabilistically before observation. They follow every possible path in quantum formulations. They connect distant events while existing at the boundary where space-time geometry behaves strangely. Perhaps photons do not truly move through geometry, because geometry itself emerges from the same deeper structure light participates in. The universe begins feeling less mechanical and more organic in an abstract sense, not alive biologically, but interconnected internally. Reality resembles a hidden fabric continuously generating the visible world from beneath perception. This strange direction appears repeatedly across modern theoretical physics. In string theory, particles emerge from vibrational states of underlying structures existing beyond ordinary dimensions. In loop quantum gravity, space-time may possess granular quantum geometry at the smallest scales. In holographic theories, entire regions of space may emerge from informational boundaries. Again and again, physical reality starts looking less like solid matter moving through emptiness and more like a projection generated from hidden mathematical relationships. The emotional impact of this realization can feel almost destabilizing at first. Human beings rely deeply on spatial certainty. You feel located inside a body occupying a position in space. The stars feel distant because enormous geometry separates them from you. Memory itself organizes experience spatially. Consciousness evolved inside emergent space-time and therefore treats geometry as obvious. But perhaps geometry is only the surface appearance of something deeper, and perhaps the universe underneath looks nothing like human intuition. There is a haunting beauty hidden inside this possibility once the mind stops resisting it. Reality becomes layered rather than empty. Beneath visible existence lies invisible architecture continuously generating space, time, matter, energy, and causality together. The cosmos stops feeling like a dead machine and begins resembling an unfolding structure too vast and subtle for ordinary senses to fully comprehend. Even darkness changes emotionally under this perspective. The empty space between galaxies no longer feels vacant. Quantum fields fluctuate there endlessly. Space-time geometry expands. Invisible relationships connect distant regions through hidden mathematical structures. Ancient radiation drifts through cosmic history. The universe becomes full even in apparent emptiness. And consciousness itself begins feeling strangely woven into this hidden architecture. Because observers are not separate from space-time. Human brains emerge from quantum fields, atomic interactions, and relativistic geometry, just like stars and galaxies do. The distinction between observer and universe softens slightly. Awareness becomes one expression of the same underlying structures, generating reality itself. Perhaps this is why deep contemplation of physics often feels emotionally overwhelming. Not because the universe becomes meaningless, but because it becomes too interconnected for ordinary intuition to comfortably contain. The boundaries humans rely upon begin dissolving. Space loses solidity. Time loses absoluteness. Matter loses certainty. Motion loses continuity. And yet beneath this dissolution emerges something unexpectedly beautiful. A universe not built from isolated things, but from relationships. A cosmos where visible reality arises from hidden structures, too profound for direct perception. A reality where geometry itself may be the surface appearance of deeper informational patterns, silently shaping existence from underneath. Light continues illuminating this mystery constantly. Every star visible in the night sky arrives through photons behaving according to laws that undermine classical geometry itself. Every beam of light quietly reveals that the universe underneath appearances may not resemble the world human intuition evolved to navigate. And perhaps the reason these ideas feel so emotionally powerful is because somewhere deep within consciousness lies an awareness that ordinary perception cannot be the final layer of reality. The stars seem too strange. Time feels too mysterious. Existence itself carries a depth impossible to fully explain through surfaces alone. Tonight, while the world slowly softens into darkness around you, it becomes possible to imagine reality differently, not as objects floating through empty space, but as visible ripples emerging from hidden geometries beneath perception. A cosmos where distance itself crystallizes from deeper relationships. A universe where space-time is not the foundation, but the appearance generated by something far more ancient and profound. And somewhere inside that invisible architecture, light may never truly travel at all. Perhaps it simply reveals the hidden geometry connecting all things underneath the illusion of separation. There is a strange emotional transformation that begins happening when a human mind spends enough time contemplating the deepest layers of physics. At first, science often feels grounding. It explains things. It reduces mystery. The stars become thermonuclear processes. Gravity becomes geometry. Light becomes electromagnetic radiation. The universe appears increasingly understandable through mathematics and observation. Many people assume this process eventually removes wonder from existence entirely, replacing mystery with mechanism. But something unexpected happens at the frontier of understanding. The deeper physics goes, the stranger reality becomes again. Not in the old mythical sense filled with gods and supernatural stories, but in a quieter and more unsettling way. Reality itself begins losing the solidity human intuition once assigned to it. Time bends, space emerges, particles become probabilities, observation changes outcomes, motion dissolves into abstractions, and eventually the universe begins feeling less like a machine and more like something profoundly dreamlike beneath its visible surface, not unreal, but dreamlike in structure, because dreams possess a strange quality that resembles quantum reality emotionally. In dreams, space shifts fluidly, time behaves unpredictably, identity becomes unstable, separate things transform into one another, events connect symbolically rather than mechanically. The deeper layers of the unconscious mind operate relationally instead of according to rigid classical logic. And while physics does not suggest the universe is literally a dream, it increasingly hints that ordinary waking intuition may not capture the true architecture of reality any more accurately than dream logic does. Human beings evolved to survive, not to perceive ultimate truth directly. The nervous system simplifies existence continuously. It compresses overwhelming complexity into manageable experience. Colors are not objective properties existing independently in reality. They are interpretations generated by brains responding to electromagnetic wavelengths. Solid objects are mostly empty atomic structures, stabilized by quantum forces. The sensation of flowing continuity emerges from neural reconstruction processes, assembling fragments into coherent awareness. Consciousness already lives inside interpretation, and perhaps the world itself emerges similarly from deeper structures beneath perception. This realization slowly changes the emotional texture of existence once it truly settles into the mind. Familiar things remain familiar, yet they acquire hidden depth. A tree no longer appears merely as a biological object occupying space. It becomes an emergent structure arising from quantum fields, atomic interactions, sunlight, gravity, chemistry, and billions of years of cosmic evolution. The tree still exists physically, but its apparent simplicity dissolves into layers of hidden process. The same becomes true for light. At first, light feels obvious. Human beings grow up surrounded by it so constantly that its strangeness disappears beneath familiarity. Sunlight fills rooms. Lamps glow softly at night. Stars shimmer overhead. Vision depends entirely upon photons entering the eyes. Light feels immediate and ordinary. Yet physics reveals that light may be one of the strangest phenomena in the universe. Photons behave both like particles and waves while fitting perfectly into neither category. They experience no proper time. They follow probabilistic paths. They emerge from electromagnetic fields, extending everywhere simultaneously. They connect events across cosmic distances while existing at the boundary where ordinary space-time intuition begins collapsing entirely. And perhaps most unsettling of all, light may not truly move in the classical sense human beings instinctively imagine. The old mechanical universe begins unraveling completely under these realizations. There may not be tiny objects continuously traveling through empty space underneath appearances. There may instead be relationships evolving through hidden structures beyond direct perception. Motion may emerge from interactions rather than existing fundamentally. Space may crystallize from entanglement. Time may emerge relationally. Matter itself may arise from deeper informational or quantum processes invisible to ordinary awareness. Reality becomes layered, and human consciousness exists inside only one layer of it. This creates an emotional sensation difficult to describe precisely. The universe starts feeling simultaneously more intimate and more incomprehensible. Intimate because separation weakens. Everything connects through fields, gravity, quantum relationships, and cosmic history. Incomprehensible because the deeper architecture beneath those connections becomes increasingly abstract and resistant to visualization. The stars overhead suddenly feel different under this perspective. not merely distant burning spheres suspended in emptiness, but ancient visible surfaces emerging from hidden quantum structures extending throughout reality itself. Every photon reaching Earth from distant galaxies carries evidence of a universe stranger than human perception evolved to understand. Even ordinary moments begin changing subtly. A beam of sunlight crossing a quiet room becomes evidence of relativity, quantum mechanics, electromagnetism, thermodynamics, nuclear fusion, and cosmic geometry all unfolding simultaneously. The visible world transforms into the surface expression of invisible processes layered beneath perception. And perhaps this is why physics often evokes emotional awe so powerfully when understood deeply enough. Not because science removes mystery, but because science reveals how much mystery truly exists underneath ordinary appearances. The ancient night sky once inspired myths because people sensed vastness beyond understanding. Modern physics preserves that vastness while replacing mythological certainty with something stranger, a mathematically lawful universe whose deepest structure still escapes intuitive comprehension. Human beings now know that visible matter forms only a small fraction of cosmic reality. Most of the universe consists of dark matter and dark energy, phenomena not yet fully understood. Spacetime itself expands. Black holes warp geometry beyond ordinary intuition. Quantum fields fluctuate invisibly beneath emptiness. Entanglement links particles across enormous distances. Reality underneath perception continues receding into deeper mystery the more closely it is examined. And somewhere inside all of this sits consciousness itself, a phenomenon equally strange, because awareness emerges from matter, capable of reflecting upon the universe that produced it. The cosmos evolves structures, able to contemplate space-time, question existence, and wonder whether motion itself is illusion. Human consciousness becomes the universe observing its own hidden architecture from within. There is something profoundly beautiful about that, especially at night, especially in silence, especially during moments when thought softens enough to stop demanding certainty, because certainty may not belong to the deepest layer of existence at all. Perhaps reality is fundamentally relational, probabilistic, emergent, and unfinished beneath appearances. Perhaps the universe resembles an ongoing process more than a completed structure. Perhaps time itself emerges gradually from deeper, timeless relationships. Perhaps motion only appears continuous because consciousness assembles experience into flowing narratives. And perhaps light reveals this more clearly than anything else in existence, not only because light allows vision, but because light quietly undermines the assumptions ordinary vision depends upon. Every visible image already arrives through a phenomenon that refuses to fit classical intuition completely. Every memory of moonlight, every distant star, every face illuminated softly in darkness carries hidden evidence that the universe beneath appearances may operate according to principles far stranger than human beings once believed possible. The longer the mind rests inside these ideas, the more reality begins feeling less rigid and more fluid. Not unreal, but alive with hidden depth. The boundaries between matter, space, time, and observation soften slightly around the edges. Existence starts resembling something unfolding continuously from invisible structures beneath perception. A dreamlike cosmos governed not by chaos, but by laws too profound for ordinary intuition alone. A universe where certainty emerges from probability. A universe where geometry emerges from connection. A universe where consciousness participates in reality instead of merely observing it from outside. And somewhere inside that endless hidden architecture, Light may never truly travel through space at all. Perhaps it simply reveals the deeper, relational structure from which the illusion of motion itself emerges. There is a quiet point that thought eventually reaches when contemplating the universe deeply enough, a place beyond the need for final answers, beyond the instinct to force reality back into familiar shapes. At first, the human mind resists uncertainty fiercely. It wants solid ground. It wants definite explanations. Tiny particles moving through empty space. Time flowing forward universally. Causes producing effects in orderly sequence. A cosmos behaving like a giant, understandable machine. But the deeper physics explores existence, the more reality slips gently beyond those expectations. And eventually something unexpected begins happening. The uncertainty itself becomes beautiful. Not because confusion is pleasant, but because mystery starts feeling woven directly into the architecture of existence. The universe stops resembling a problem waiting to be solved and begins feeling more like an endless horizon of hidden structure, always revealing deeper layers beneath every apparent answer. Light has carried humanity toward this horizon for more than a century. At first, it seemed simple: a wave, then a particle, then both simultaneously, then neither fully. Photons became quantum excitations within electromagnetic fields. Relativity removed proper time from light entirely. Quantum mechanics dissolved definite trajectories into probabilities. Space itself began appearing emergent. Observation altered outcomes. Motion lost certainty. And now, after following light through all these revolutions, one possibility quietly remains suspended at the edge of thought. Perhaps light never truly moves at all. Perhaps motion itself is not fundamental. This idea no longer feels as impossible as it once did. The mind has slowly traveled through relativity, quantum mechanics, space-time geometry, entanglement, fields, probability, and emergent reality. The old mechanical picture dissolved chapter by chapter, and what remains is not emptiness, but something stranger and far more profound. A universe built from relationships, a cosmos where space may emerge from connection, a reality where time may arise from deeper, timeless structures, a world where observation participates in existence rather than standing outside it. Under this perspective, motion becomes something secondary, an appearance generated inside conscious experience, rather than the deepest layer of reality itself. The emotional effect of this realization is difficult to describe because it transforms ordinary existence subtly rather than dramatically. The world does not disappear. Trees still sway in wind. Oceans still reflect moonlight. Cities still glow beneath rain-soaked nights. Human beings still laugh, grieve, hope, and dream. Everyday life remains real. But underneath that familiar reality, another layer begins revealing itself. The layer where nothing is as isolated as it first appears. Every atom in your body was forged inside ancient stars. Every breath exchanges molecules continuously with the wider Earth. Gravity links you to distant galaxies. Electromagnetic fields pass invisibly through your nervous system every second. Quantum fields stretch throughout space-time itself. Human consciousness emerges from interactions woven into cosmic history, reaching back toward the earliest moments of the universe. Separation becomes softer under this perspective. And perhaps that is why the idea that motion may be illusion feels strangely emotional rather than purely scientific, because movement depends on separation. To travel requires distance between beginning and end. But if distance itself emerges from deeper relationships, then the universe underneath appearances may already possess a hidden unity beyond ordinary spatial intuition. Light hints toward this unity constantly. A photon born in the core of a distant star can eventually become part of a human thought billions of years later. Ancient radiation from the early universe still drifts across spacetime and enters modern instruments. Every visible moment links events separated by enormous scales of time and geometry. Yet relativity quietly whispers that for light itself, no duration passes between those events, beginning and ending touch. The deeper meaning of this remains uncertain, perhaps forever beyond complete human comprehension. But uncertainty does not diminish the beauty of the mystery. If anything, it deepens it, because there is something profoundly moving about existing inside a universe that exceeds human intuition. For most of history, people feared mystery because mystery implied danger or ignorance. But modern physics transformed mystery into something else entirely. Not darkness waiting to be eliminated, but depth waiting to be contemplated. The stars overhead no longer appear merely distant. They appear ancient, interconnected, and strangely intimate. Every beam of starlight entering human eyes tonight carries hidden evidence of relativity, quantum mechanics, nuclear fusion, space-time geometry, and cosmic history all unfolding together simultaneously. The visible universe becomes a surface expression of invisible structures operating beneath perception. And perhaps consciousness itself belongs to those structures more deeply than human beings realize. Not as something supernatural, but as something relational. A way for the universe to become aware of its own unfolding patterns from within. There is a quiet comfort hidden inside this possibility. Human life often feels small against cosmic scales. Civilizations vanish, stars die, galaxies collide across unimaginable distances. Time stretches beyond comprehension. Yet consciousness still emerges briefly inside this vastness and asks questions about existence itself. Matter becomes aware enough to contemplate space-time, wonder about photons, and stare silently into the night, asking what reality truly is. That alone feels miraculous, especially if the universe underneath appearances is not cold machinery, but a vast interconnected process continuously emerging from hidden relationships. Perhaps reality is less like a machine and more like music, a symphony of interactions unfolding across invisible structures, too profound for direct perception. Music does not exist inside isolated notes alone. Meaning emerges from relationships between notes unfolding through time. Likewise, the universe may not fundamentally consist of separate objects moving through emptiness. Meaning, structure, and reality itself may emerge from relationships beneath ordinary observation. Light then becomes not merely illumination, but participation in the cosmic symphony itself, a bridge between events, a connection between moments, a visible expression of hidden geometry. And maybe that is why light feels emotionally symbolic across so many cultures and histories. Long before physics existed, human beings sensed something mysterious about it. Light revealed the world while remaining difficult to grasp itself. It carried warmth, vision, life, and wonder. Modern science only deepened that mystery rather than removing it. Because the closer humanity approached understanding light, the more the foundations of reality itself began dissolving into abstraction. Motion blurred into probability. Space softened into geometry. Time fractured into relativity. Matter dissolved into fields. And still light remained there quietly at the center of every revelation. Perhaps this is where contemplation finally becomes silence. Not because there's nothing left to think about, but because reality has become too deep for complete conceptual capture. The universe exceeds language eventually. Mathematics reaches further than intuition, Yet even equations may only describe surfaces of deeper truths, still hidden beyond current understanding. And maybe that is enough. Maybe existence does not need final certainty to possess meaning. Maybe wonder itself is part of the point. Tonight, as darkness settles gently around the edges of awareness and the world grows quieter, it becomes possible to rest inside that wonder without needing to resolve it completely. To simply feel the strange beauty of existing inside a universe where light may not truly move, where space and time may emerge from hidden structures, where consciousness briefly awakens to contemplate the cosmos that created it, a universe endlessly mysterious, endlessly interconnected, endlessly deeper than appearances suggest. And somewhere within that infinite hidden architecture, photons continue arriving silently from distant stars, carrying with them the possibility that motion itself was never quite what human beings believed it to be. Thank you for drifting through this journey with science sleep theory. If tonight's exploration left you staring a little differently into the darkness, quietly wondering about the hidden structure beneath reality, then subscribe and return for more slow deep dives into the strangest questions in physics, cosmology, and existence itself. And before you fall asleep tonight, leave a comment below with one final thought. If light never truly moves, then what exactly is reality made of?